Okay, so in this video, we're just going to briefly look at and talk about the different state shapes. This goes more with Chapter 8 than it does with Chapter 7, but it helps to explain a little bit of the stuff that we just talked about with the Berlin Conference in Africa in terms of why countries are shaped in this sort of way and how does that actually affect the politics and the resources and everything else related to it. So kind of a extension of the colonialism and some of the issues that we see going on within Africa. And we also use Africa also because of the fact that it fits so many of the different categories of the different state shapes. So our definitions in these are just kind of straight out of the book. All right, you got a compact state, okay, where essentially distance from the center to any boundary doesn't really vary significantly. You think about when we talk about the center of a country, we're like, okay, here's the center, here's like a needle right in the center, and then going any direction, it's pretty similar from one end to the other. So countries like Germany, Poland, France, those fitted pretty well. Elongated states are states that are long and really, really narrow. So think Chile in South America would fit really, really well with that. Then we get prorupted, okay, as a compact state that has a very large projecting extension. So again, we'll see examples of this here that are created for two different resources. And this, when we talk about superimposed boundaries of, a country that has, they've created this extension of their boundary for a particular purpose. All right. So one is to have a state that has access to a certain resource, whether that could be oil, water, diamonds, uranium, whatever. They've created that in order to get access to this, or to separate two states that would otherwise share a boundary. Again, you can think about that in terms of, well, do we want to create conflict? Do we want to create alliances? Do we want to, get in people's way? Other types of examples of that. So then we get, instead of prorupted, we also have perforate states. And these are states that completely surround other states. All right. That means that there are countries literally within inside of this country that do not share other boundaries. All right. So we'll talk about that again. Then we get fragmented states. And this is pretty basic. It's fragmented, which means that it's not together. Whether that's fragmented by land, which doesn't happen all that time, typically by an intervening state connected to a prorupted state, all right, with the idea of Kaliningrad, which is part of Russia, separated by Belarus and Lithuania, or separated by water, which is the more common example here. So think any country that has several islands or island chains. The United States even fits in this, with us in Hawaii and Alaska, also Canada being a bit of an intervening state there too. Indonesia, Malaysia, Japan, any country that has any island off the mainland fits with that separated by water as a fragmentation. Okay, then the other type is landlocked. So it's completely surrounded by at least one, if not more, countries and has no access to the sea because it's completely surrounded. Doesn't mean like it doesn't have rivers running through it or lakes. It just means that at the end of the day, they don't get access to the sea without having to go through another country. All right, so when we talk about the examples here, all right, so visually to look at this, all right, so here's, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Australia, Malaysia, the Philippines. These are all examples of fragmentation by water, all right. Then when we looked at fragmentation by an intervening state, okay, Angola fits in that because here's Cabinda, okay, that's part of Angola right up here, but is completely cut off because of its boundary with the Democratic of the Republic of Congo right here. So there's your fragmentation by an independent state or intervening state. Prorupted, okay, you have the Gambia, which essentially cuts off the connection between Guinea-Bissau and Senegal. All right. Other countries, so here you have all these ones. These are landlocked states, so Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Central African Republic, You can kind of see all those highlighted colors within them. But also within our completely landlocked countries, you also have perforated states, okay, where South Africa completely surrounds Lesotho. Swaziland is pretty close to that, but also has connection to Mozambique, all right? And then we have our compact state, which is an example of Ethiopia. You can also maybe think Egypt or Libya that fit that fairly well, all right? And then an example of an elongated state, you could think with Mozambique, all right, up and down the East African coastline, fitting within that. All right, and then just so you can kind of see this globally, here's all your landlocked different countries. Okay, not a whole lot in the Americas, but we have two. Okay, most of them are Africa, Asia, parts within Europe. But again, keep in mind that even though you see, they have sea access, but they don't have access to the actual oceans. That's the big key. All right, so one thing to consider, and this is something to pay attention to, and we're not going to do this here in the video, but look at it in the perspective of what problems may exist when you have an elongated state, or if you are perforated, as we've kind of seen. If you are completely surrounded by other countries, what problems might that happen? What happens if your country is fragmented by water, or by intervening states, or if you're landlocked? Or sorry, not if you are perforated. If you are surrounding another country, what issues might you be having? If your people are in a different country, or sorry, if you're, different ethnic groups in some of these countries that are either elongated or fragmented or landlocked, what issues might come up? What issues might come up with, international conflict or cooperation? Those are things to consider in terms of, again, centripetal and centrifugal, as well as connections with other countries too. So that's where we're going to stop. Like I said, very brief video. But when we also, one last thing before I forget, is that in many cases, when we look at this, a lot of the boundaries, again, being shaped by the Europeans. So when we talk about Gambia and we talk about Angola, being pro-erupted and fragmented, part of that is, again, connections to the Berlin Conference and the way that these lines were drawn up. All right. Same thing with a number of these other different borders and boundaries. All right. Just kind of more arbitrary, but then trying to maybe possibly align with different ethnicities. So again, it's an extension of that colonialism, as well as, other places around the globe, within, again, Indonesia, Malaysia, other places as well. So that's where we're going to stop. All right. So hopefully you can look at those and consider what might be some of the benefits, what are some of the negatives, what are some of the drawbacks and potential conflicts or issues that might come up within these.